The blood pooling beneath the iron cage had already soaked into the dirt floor of the barn, and the creature inside had not moved in over an hour. Alden Thorne stood at the entrance, his weathered hands gripping his worn leather bag, taking in the scene with the practiced eye of a man who had spent 50 years treating animals that most people had given up on. The farmer who had summoned him, a broad-shouldered man named Garrett, shifted nervously from foot to foot. "The other vets wouldn't even come out here," Garrett said, his voice tight with anxiety. "Soon as I told them it was an orc war beast, they hung up or made excuses. One said his wagon broke down. Another said he don't treat monsters." Alden stepped closer to the cage, ignoring the nervous murmuring of the small crowd that had gathered outside the barn. Through the iron bars, he could see her clearly now. Not just a war beast, but the orc woman who rode her. She was sprawled protectively over the massive wolf-like creature, her green skin pale and waxy, her small tusks visible as her mouth hung slightly open. The war beast beneath her was easily the size of a draft horse, with midnight black fur matted with blood and dirt. One of its hind legs was twisted at an unnatural angle, clearly broken, and deep gashes ran along its flank. "How did this happen?" Alden asked, setting his bag down and rolling up his sleeves. "Raiders attacked her on the North Road 3 days ago," Garrett explained. "Human raiders, from what I could tell. Found her and the beast collapsed near my property line. I got them into the cage before anyone else saw, but I don't know what to do. The beast needs help, and the orc woman, she won't leave it. She is barely conscious herself." Alden approached the cage slowly. The orc woman's eyes flickered open, revealing amber irises that struggled to focus. She could not have been more than 20 summers, with the strong features and pointed ears of her kind. But there was something vulnerable about her now, something that spoke of desperate exhaustion. Her leather armor was torn and blood-stained, and one arm hung uselessly at her side. "I am not here to hurt you," Alden said quietly, meeting her gaze. "I am a veterinarian. I treat animals. Your companion needs help." The orc woman's lips moved, forming words that barely made it past her tusks. "Cora. Her name is Cora." "And what is your name?" "Thara." The word came out as barely more than a whisper. Alden turned to Garrett. "I need to get in there. She is too weak to attack me, and that beast would not have lasted this long if she meant to let it die. Get me some strong men who can hold the beast still while I work." "You cannot be serious," Garrett protested. "That thing could tear you apart." "That thing is dying," Alden said flatly. "And I did not drive 2 hours out here to watch it happen. Get me those men, or I will work alone." Garrett hesitated, then nodded and hurried out. Alden unlocked the cage and stepped inside, moving slowly and deliberately. Thara watched him with those amber eyes, her good hand twitching toward the long knife at her belt, but she lacked the strength to draw it. "Easy," Alden murmured. "I have been doing this longer than you have been alive, girl. I have set broken legs on ornery mules, stitched up guard dogs that would sooner bite than breathe, and once spent 6 hours coaxing a foal into the world during a blizzard. Your Cora here is in bad shape, but I have seen worse." He knelt beside the war beast, running his hands gently over her massive frame. The creature's breathing was shallow and labored, her eyes closed. Up close, he could see the intelligence in the shape of her skull, the careful breeding that had gone into creating such a magnificent animal. War beasts were not mere animals, they were companions, bred and raised alongside their orc riders from birth, bonded in ways that humans rarely understood. "The leg is broken clean through," he said, more to himself than to Thara. "These wounds need cleaning and stitching. She has lost blood, probably has infection starting, but the bone did not pierce the skin, and her breathing, while weak, is steady. If we can stabilize the leg and fight the infection, she has a chance." Thara made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. "No human helps orcs." "I am not helping an orc," Alden said, opening his bag and pulling out supplies. "I am helping an animal that deserves better than to die in a cage because of human prejudice." He paused, then added, "Though I suppose I am helping you too, since you would likely die of grief if she passed." Garrett returned with 3 men, all of them looking uncertain and afraid. Alden gave them quick, precise instructions. 2 would hold Cora's head and shoulders, 1 would secure her hindquarters, and Garrett would assist Alden directly. The men moved into position reluctantly, clearly terrified of both the war beast and the orc woman who watched them with fevered eyes. "Hold her," Alden commanded, and then he went to work. His hands moved with the confidence of decades of experience. He cleaned the wounds first, using a solution that would fight infection, his touch gentle but firm. Cora stirred once, a low growl rumbling in her chest, but Thara reached out with her good hand and placed it on the beast's head, murmuring words in the orcish tongue. The war beast settled, though her muscles remained tense beneath Alden's hands. The worst wound required 17 stitches. Alden worked methodically, his needle moving in precise patterns, drawing the torn flesh back together. Sweat beaded on his forehead in the close heat of the barn, but his hands never wavered. When the wounds were closed and bandaged, he turned his attention to the broken leg. "This is going to be the difficult part," he said. "I need to set the bone, and it is going to hurt her. She might thrash." "I will keep her calm," Thara said, though her voice was weak. She had shifted closer to Cora's head, her fingers buried in the thick black fur. Alden positioned himself carefully, feeling along the break, visualizing how the bones needed to align. Then, with a swift, practiced movement, he pulled and twisted. Cora howled, a sound that sent the men stumbling backward in fear, but Thara held on, her voice rising in a low, rhythmic chant. Alden felt the bones click into place and immediately began wrapping the leg in splints and bandages, securing it tightly. By the time he finished, his shirt was soaked with sweat and his hands ached. He sat back on his heels, surveying his work. The war beast's breathing had already improved, becoming deeper and more regular. The immediate crisis had passed. "She needs rest, clean water, and food when she wakes," Alden said, looking at Garrett. "Change the bandages twice daily and watch for signs of infection, heat, swelling, discharge. Keep her still as much as possible for the next 2 weeks while that bone begins to heal." "And the orc?" Garrett asked. Alden turned to Thara, really looking at her for the first time. Her injured arm was clearly dislocated at the shoulder, and he could see other wounds beneath her torn armor. She had been protecting her beast even while gravely injured herself. "That is not my expertise," Alden said slowly. "But I can see that shoulder needs setting and those wounds need tending. Do you have a healer nearby?" "No healers will come for an orc," Garrett said quietly. Alden sighed, feeling the weight of the world's cruelty settling on his shoulders once again. "Then I suppose I will have to do what I can. I have set plenty of dislocated joints in my time. A shoulder is a shoulder, whether it is on a horse or a woman." He moved to Thara's side. She watched him warily, her amber eyes clearer now, sharpened by pain and suspicion. "Why do you help?" "Because I took an oath long ago to ease suffering where I found it," Alden said simply. "And because I am too old and too stubborn to care what people think of me anymore. This is going to hurt." "I am sorry for that." He examined her shoulder carefully, feeling the displacement of the joint. Then, meeting her eyes, he said, "On 3. 1, he pulled sharply, using the element of surprise to his advantage. Thara's cry of pain was cut short as the joint popped back into place. She slumped forward, breathing hard, but when she moved her arm experimentally, relief washed over her features. "Thank you," she said, the words sounding foreign on her tongue, as though she had rarely had cause to say them to a human. Alden cleaned and dressed her other wounds, working with the same methodical care he had shown Cora. When he was done, he stood and gathered his supplies. "You both need rest. I will come back tomorrow to check on you." "Why?" Thara asked again, her voice stronger now. "You do not know me." "You owe me nothing." "No," Alden agreed. "But I know what it is like to watch something you love suffer and be powerless to help. I lost my wife 10 years ago to a sickness no healer could cure. Spent every day watching her fade, knowing there was nothing I could do. If I can prevent that pain for someone else, even an orc I just met, then I will." He left the barn, ignoring the stares and whispers of the crowd that had gathered. Let them talk. He had never cared much for public opinion anyway. True to his word, Alden returned the next day and the day after that. Each time he checked Cora's wounds, changed her bandages, and monitored her progress. The war beast was young and strong, and with proper care, she began to improve rapidly. By the 4th day, she was eating again, devouring the raw meat that Garrett provided with obvious hunger. By the end of the 1st week, she could stand on 3 legs, keeping the injured one carefully elevated. Thara recovered even faster. Her natural orcish constitution meant her wounds healed at a rate that impressed even Alden's experienced eye. But she refused to leave Cora's side, sleeping curled against the war beast's massive form, her hand always resting on the creature's fur. As the days passed, Alden found himself talking to Thara more. At first, their conversations were brief and practical, limited to questions about Cora's care and Thara's own recovery. But gradually, as trust built between them, the talks lengthened and deepened. "How did you come to bond with her?" Alden asked one afternoon as he checked Cora's leg splint. Thara's expression softened. "We were born on the same day in the same hour. It is the way of my people. The war beasts are bred to match with warriors, and we grow together from infancy. She is not my pet or my mount. She is my sister, my companion, the other half of my soul. Without her, I am incomplete." "And that is why you protected her even while wounded yourself," Alden said, understanding. "I would die for her," Thara said simply, "and she would do the same for me. When the raiders attacked, she threw herself between me and their blades. She took wounds meant for me. The raiders, they were human." Thara's jaw tightened. "Yes, they wanted to capture me to sell me to slavers in the south. There is a market for orc warriors among some human lords. We are seen as exotic prizes, animals to be broken and displayed." Her voice carried a bitterness that spoke of deep wounds beyond the physical. "Cora fought like the warrior she is. We killed 3 of them before they managed to injure her badly enough that we had to flee. We ran for 2 days before collapsing on that farmer's land." Alden was quiet for a moment, processing this. He had heard rumors of such things, whispers in taverns about the darker trades that flourished in the border regions, but he had never wanted to believe humans capable of such cruelty. "I am sorry," he said finally. "No one should be hunted like that." "Why do you care?" Thara asked, but this time the question carried less suspicion and more genuine curiosity. "You are human. My people raid human settlements. We have been at war for generations." "Because war and hatred only breed more suffering," Alden said. "I have seen enough of it in my life. When I was young, I served as a field medic in the border conflicts. I stitched up soldiers who had been torn apart by orcish blades, and once I treated a group of orc prisoners who had been tortured by human captors. Pain looks the same on every face, regardless of the color of the skin or the shape of the ears. I decided then that I would spend the rest of my life healing rather than contributing to the cycle of violence. Thara studied him for a long moment. You are strange for a human. I have been called worse, Alden said with a slight smile. By the second week, Cora was strong enough to walk short distances with a careful limp. The bone was healing well, and the infection that Alden had feared never materialized thanks to his diligent care. Thara was fully recovered, her orc healing having closed even the deepest wounds, leaving only faint scars. But a new problem had emerged. Word had spread about the orc and her war beast being housed on Garrett's property. A group of villagers, led by a man named Marcus, who fancied himself a sort of unofficial militia leader, had begun demanding that Thara be turned over to the local magistrate or driven out of the territory entirely. Alden arrived one morning to find a tense standoff. Marcus and a dozen armed men had gathered outside the barn while Garrett stood at the door, his own hunting rifle in hand. "This is my property," Garrett was saying, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "And I will decide who stays and who goes." "That orc is a threat to our community," Marcus shot back. "Her kind have raided our farms, killed our livestock, murdered our people. She needs to go one way or another." Alden pushed through the crowd, his veterinary bag in hand. "That orc is injured and recovering, as is her companion." "They are no threat to anyone." Marcus rounded on him. You are the one who has been coming out here, treating that monster like it is some kind of pet. You are as bad as he is, giving aid to the enemy." "I am a veterinarian doing my job," Alden said calmly. "And last I checked, healing the sick and injured was not a crime, regardless of their species." "It is when they are orcs," Marcus spat. "We should drag her out of there and string her up as a warning to any others who think they can just wander onto human lands." The men behind Marcus murmured in agreement, hefting their weapons. Alden felt a cold anger settle in his gut. He had seen this before, had watched mobs turn violent over fear and prejudice, had helped bury the victims of that kind of hatred. "You will have to go through me first," he said quietly. Marcus laughed. "You are an old man. Get out of the way before you get hurt." "I may be old," Alden agreed, "but I am also the only veterinarian within 3 days' ride, and every one of you has animals that you depend on for your livelihood. Your milk cow, Marcus, she is getting on in years, is she not? I would hate for something to happen to her and have no one willing to help. And your prized breeding mare, Thomas, the one you spent a fortune on. Shame if she colicked and there was no one to treat her." The men shifted uncomfortably. Alden pressed his advantage. "I have served this community for 30 years. I have saved your animals, delivered your foals and calves, put down the suffering when there was no other mercy to be given. I have earned the right to make my own choices about who I treat. And I choose to help anyone, human or orc, who needs it." "You would choose them over your own kind?" Marcus demanded. "I choose compassion over cruelty," Alden said. "Every time, and if that makes me a traitor in your eyes, so be it." The standoff might have turned violent, but at that moment, Thara emerged from the barn. She moved slowly, aware of the weapons trained on her, but her head was high and her amber eyes were clear. Cora limped at her side, still favoring her healing leg but looking far stronger than she had 2 weeks ago. "I will leave," Thara announced. "I do not wish to bring trouble to those who have shown me kindness. Cora is strong enough to travel and we can be gone within the hour." "You are not strong enough for a long journey," Alden protested. "Cora's leg is still healing. Another week of rest and proper care would mean another week of danger for these humans," Thara interrupted. "I will not repay their mercy by bringing violence to their door." She looked at Garrett, then at Alden. "Thank you, both of you. You have given me back my sister. That is a debt I can never repay." She turned to leave, but Alden found himself speaking before he had fully thought through what he was saying. "Come with me." Everyone turned to stare at him. Even Garrett looked shocked. "What?" Thara asked. "Come with me," Alden repeated, the plan forming even as he spoke. "I have a homestead about 10 miles south of here on the edge of the frontier. It is isolated, far from any villages. You and Cora can stay there while she finishes healing. I have a barn that is larger and better equipped than this cage, and enough land that Cora can move around and exercise once she is ready." "You cannot be serious," Marcus said. "You would bring an orc onto your land, my choice," Alden said firmly. "And yes, I am serious. Thara and Cora need a safe place to recover fully. I can provide that." Thara was looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Why would you do this? You have already done more than any human has ever done for me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Alden said simply. "And because I have the space and the skills to help. The question is, will you accept?" Thara was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. "Yes, thank you." Marcus made a sound of disgust and turned away, his followers trailing after him. Alden could hear them muttering threats and promises to take the matter to higher authorities, but he ignored them. He had made his choice, and he would deal with the consequences. The journey to Alden's homestead took most of the day. They traveled slowly to accommodate Cora's injury, taking frequent breaks. Alden drove his wagon while Thara walked alongside Cora, one hand resting on the war beast's flank. Garrett had supplied them with provisions and wished them well, though Alden could see the worry in the farmer's eyes. The homestead, when they finally reached it, was larger than Thara had expected. Alden's house was a sturdy 2-story structure built from local timber, with a wide porch and large windows. The barn was indeed spacious, clearly built by someone who took animal care seriously. There were also several smaller outbuildings, a well and cleared fields that suggested this had once been a working farm. "I used to raise horses," Alden explained as he showed Thara and Cora to the barn. "Had a breeding program, trained them for riding and work. But after my wife died, I sold off most of the stock. I keep a few animals now for my own use, but mostly I just travel between homesteads and villages, treating animals wherever they are needed." He had prepared a large stall at the end of the barn, filling it with fresh straw and setting out water and food. Cora sniffed around suspiciously before settling down with a grunt of satisfaction. "There is a room in the house you can use," Alden said to Thara. "Unless you prefer to stay out here with her." "I will stay with Cora," Thara said immediately. Alden nodded, having expected as much. "I will bring out blankets and supplies. There is a pump in the barn for washing, and the outhouse is behind the second shed. I will make dinner in a few hours. You are welcome to eat with me in the house, or I can bring food out here." "Why are you doing this?" Thara asked again, but this time her tone was different, not suspicious, but genuinely trying to understand. Alden considered the question carefully. "When my wife was sick, we were shunned by some in the community. They thought her illness might be contagious or cursed or any number of superstitious nonsense. People we had considered friends crossed the street to avoid us. Only a few stood by us, and I learned then the value of compassion in the face of fear. I swore I would never turn away someone in need because of what others might think. You needed help. I could provide it. It is that simple." "It is never that simple," Thara said softly. "But I thank you nonetheless." Over the following days, a routine developed. Alden tended to Cora's injuries, monitoring her progress and adjusting her treatment as needed. The war beast continued to heal remarkably well, and soon she was moving around the barn freely, though still with a slight limp. Thara helped with the daily chores around the homestead, feeding Alden's remaining animals, hauling water, mending fences. She worked with a quiet efficiency that spoke of someone used to hard labor. In the evenings, after the work was done, Alden and Thara would often sit on the porch and talk. These conversations ranged widely, from practical discussions about animal care to deeper topics about their respective cultures and experiences. "What was your wife like?" Thara asked one evening as they watched the sun set over the distant mountains. Alden smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. Elinor was a force of nature. She had more energy and passion in her little finger than most people have in their whole body. She was the one who convinced me to start the horse breeding program. She was the one who pushed me to take on difficult cases that other vets turned away. She never saw obstacles, only opportunities. When she got sick, she fought until the very end, made me promise I would not let her death turn me bitter and small. "You loved her very much," Thara said. "I did. I still do." Alden was quiet for a moment. "What about you? Is there someone waiting for you back with your clan?" Thara shook her head. "I was cast out before I bonded with Cora. In orc society, those who show weakness or question the old ways are not tolerated. I asked too many questions, challenged too many traditions. My elders decided I was not fit to remain with the clan. Cora and I have been wandering for 3 years, taking work where we can find it, surviving on the edges of both orcish and human territories. That sounds like a hard life." "It is the only life I know now. But it is mine, and I am free in a way I never was within the clan. I can make my own choices, follow my own path. That freedom is worth the hardship." Alden nodded slowly. He understood that sentiment better than Thara probably realized. His decision to help her had been, in its own way, an assertion of that same freedom, the right to choose compassion over conformity. As the weeks passed, something shifted between them. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. A moment where their hands brushed as they both reached for the same tool, and neither pulled away quite as quickly as they might have. The way Thara's eyes followed Alden as he worked, watching the careful precision of his movements. The way Alden found himself looking forward to their evening conversations, preparing topics in his mind that he thought might interest her. One afternoon, about a month after Thara had arrived at the homestead, Alden was examining Cora's leg when he realized the war beast was watching him with an intelligence that was almost unnerving. Her golden eyes, so similar to Thara's amber ones, seemed to look straight through him. "She likes you," Thara said from where she sat nearby, mending a piece of leather tack. "War beasts are excellent judges of character. If she did not trust you, you would know it." "I am honored," Alden said, meaning it. He had seen enough of Cora's strength and ferocity when she was alert to know that her trust was not given lightly. "She thinks you have a kind heart," Thara continued, and there was something in her voice that made Alden look up. "She wonders why you live alone, why you have not found another mate." Alden felt his cheeks warm slightly. "I suppose I have been too busy or too set in my ways. After Elinor died, I did not see the point in looking. We had something rare, and I did not think I would find that again." "Perhaps you were not looking in the right places," Thara said quietly. Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them felt charged with something unspoken. Then Cora shifted, breaking the moment, and they both returned to their tasks. But the tension remained, growing stronger with each passing day. Alden found himself noticing things about Thara that had nothing to do with her injuries or her orc heritage. The way she laughed, rare but genuine, when one of his old horses did something particularly silly. The careful gentleness with which she handled even the smallest creatures, a rabbit with a broken leg or a bird that had flown into a window. The strength in her arms as she lifted heavy bales of hay, and the grace in her movements despite her powerful build. He tried to tell himself it was inappropriate. She was his patient in a sense, or at least under his protection. She was an orc and he was human, and there were centuries of mistrust and violence between their peoples. She was young enough to be his daughter, though at 55, he was hardly ancient. And yet, none of these rational arguments seemed to matter when she smiled at him, or when they sat together in comfortable silence, or when her hand lingered on his shoulder in thanks for some small kindness. Thara, for her part, was experiencing her own confusion. She had never expected to feel anything for a human beyond wariness or distrust. Her experiences had taught her that humans were dangerous, that they saw orcs as monsters to be feared or exploited. But Alden had shattered those assumptions. He treated her with respect, saw her as a person rather than a thing. He had risked his reputation and possibly his safety to help her and Cora, and he never asked for anything in return. She found herself watching him work, admiring the skill in his hands, the patience in his demeanor. She noticed the silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of a lifetime of both laughter and sorrow. She found herself wondering what it would be like to stay here permanently, to make a life in this peaceful place with this gentle man. The thought terrified her. She had spent her adult life fighting for survival, trusting only Cora. The idea of opening herself to that kind of vulnerability, especially with a human, felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. And yet, the longing persisted. The turning point came on a rainy afternoon in late autumn. Alden had gone into the nearby town for supplies, leaving Thara alone at the homestead. She had been working in the barn when she heard horses approaching, too many horses, moving too quickly. She moved to the barn door and peered out. A group of men, 8 or 9 of them, armed and clearly looking for trouble. She recognized Marcus among them, along with several others from the village where she had first encountered Alden. "We know you are in there, orc," Marcus called out. "We have had enough of you polluting our lands. Come out, and maybe we will make this quick." Thara felt fear spike through her, but it was not for herself. If these men were here, they might hurt Alden when he returned. They might destroy his home, his livelihood, everything he had built. And it would be her fault for bringing this trouble to his door. Cora moved up beside her, a low growl rumbling in her chest. The war beast's leg had healed well over the past weeks, and while she still could not run at full speed, she was more than capable of fighting. "No," Thara whispered, placing a hand on Cora's head. "We will not give them an excuse to kill us. We will leave peacefully." She stepped out of the barn, her hands raised to show she was unarmed. "I am leaving. There is no need for violence." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You think it is that simple? You think you can just waltz into our territory, live among us like you have a right to be here, and then leave whenever you please? You are a blight, and we are going to remove you permanently." The men began to spread out, encircling her. Thara calculated her chances. She was outnumbered and had no weapons. With Cora's help, she might be able to fight her way free, but that would mean injuring or killing these men, which would only confirm every prejudice they held about orcs. It would also bring terrible consequences down on Alden. She was still trying to decide on a course of action when she heard the sound of a wagon approaching at speed. Alden's wagon came around the bend in the road, and he pulled the horses to a stop so abruptly that they reared. "What is going on here?" he demanded, jumping down from the driver's seat. "Stay out of this, old man," Marcus warned. "This is not your concern anymore." "Everything that happens on my property is my concern," Alden said, moving to stand between Thara and the armed men. "And you are trespassing." "We are protecting our community," Marcus said. "That orc is dangerous. She needs to be dealt with." She has done nothing to any of you, Alden shot back. She has been living peacefully on my land, helping me with my work, causing no trouble. Your only problem with her is what she is, not what she has done. That is problem enough, one of the other men said. Orcs are monsters. Everyone knows that. Monsters, Alden repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. I will tell you what is monstrous. Monstrous is a group of armed men threatening an injured woman who has committed no crime. Monstrous is letting hatred and fear drive you to violence. Monstrous is rejecting compassion because it does not fit your narrow worldview. You are a traitor to your own kind, Marcus spat. I am loyal to my principles, Alden corrected, which include treating all beings with dignity and respect. Now, I suggest you all leave before I ride into town and report this attempt at vigilante justice to the actual authorities. The authorities agree with us, Marcus said. We have permission from the magistrate to deal with orc threats however we see fit. Alden's jaw tightened. Then the magistrate is a fool, and you are cowards, hiding behind legal pretense to justify your cruelty. Marcus made a sharp gesture, and two of the men grabbed Alden, forcing him to his knees. Thara started forward, but more men moved to block her path, weapons raised. You want to protect the orcs so badly, Marcus said, pulling out a knife. Maybe we should make an example of you too. Show everyone what happens to those who betray their own kind. Rage flashed through Thara, hot and bright. These humans would hurt Alden, might even kill him, simply because he had shown her kindness. It was the confirmation of every lesson her clan had tried to teach her, that humans were treacherous, that their prejudice ran soul deep, that there could never be peace between their peoples. But then she looked at Alden, still on his knees, his eyes meeting hers with a calm that bordered on serene. He was not begging for mercy or cursing her for bringing this upon him. He was simply accepting the consequences of his choices, the same way he had accepted everything else in his life with quiet dignity, and she realized that she could not let him face those consequences alone. Stop, she said, her voice ringing out across the yard. I will make you a deal. Marcus turned to her, eyebrow raised. What kind of deal? Trial by combat, Thara said. Your champion against me. If I win, you leave us in peace. If I lose, you can do whatever you want with me, but Alden goes free, unharmed. The men murmured among themselves. Marcus looked intrigued. And what makes you think we would agree to that? Because you want to prove that orcs are monsters, Thara said. What better way than to beat one in fair combat? You can tell everyone that you bested an orc warrior in single battle. It would make you a hero. She paused, letting the temptation sink in. Unless you are afraid you cannot win, that did it. Marcus's face flushed with anger. Fine, I will fight you. But when I win, I want you to know that your sacrifice will be for nothing. The old man has made his choice to side with monsters. He will suffer the consequences, whether today or tomorrow. That is for tomorrow to worry about, Thara said. Today we fight. The men formed a rough circle, pushing Alden to the side but keeping hold of him. One of them tossed a sword to Thara, a serviceable weapon if not a particularly good one. Marcus drew his own blade, testing its weight. This is foolish, Alden called out. Thara, you do not have to do this. Yes, I do, she called back. You risked everything to help me. It is time I returned the favor. The fight began with Marcus lunging forward, his blade aimed at Thara's midsection. She sidestepped easily, her natural agility and strength giving her an advantage. But Marcus was no novice fighter. He had clearly had training, and he used his reach well. They circled each other, trading blows. Thara could feel the weight of her earlier injuries, the weeks of recovery that had left her slightly weaker than normal. But she also felt something else, a fierce determination not just to survive, but to protect the man who had protected her. Marcus was fast, but Thara was faster. She ducked under his swing and came up inside his guard, her fist connecting with his jaw. He stumbled back, spitting blood, his eyes widening with shock. She had held back, not wanting to kill him if she could avoid it, but she had made her point. "Yield," she said. "This does not have to end in death." Marcus roared in fury and came at her again, all strategy abandoned in favor of raw aggression. Thara met his charge, their blades clashing with a sound like thunder. She could feel the impact reverberating up her arm, but she held firm. They fought across the yard, neither giving quarter. Thara's sword work was beautiful to watch, efficient, powerful, precise. She had been trained from childhood in the art of combat, and even weeks of recovery could not erase that muscle memory. Finally, she saw her opening. Marcus overextended on a thrust and she pivoted, bringing her blade around to knock his weapon from his hand. Before he could recover, she had him on the ground, her knee on his chest and her sword at his throat. "Yield," she said again, breathing hard. Marcus stared up at her with hatred in his eyes, but he nodded. "I yield." Thara stepped back, allowing him to rise. The other men had gone silent, staring at her with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. She turned to them, still holding her sword. "We had a deal," she said. "I won. You leave us in peace." "You won today," Marcus said, clutching his bruised throat. "But this is not over. There are more of us and we will be back." "Then I will be ready," Thara said calmly, "and next time I might not be so merciful." The men mounted their horses and rode off, though not without dark looks and muttered threats. When they were gone, the men holding Alden released him. He rushed to Thara immediately, his hands on her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently. "I am fine," she assured him. "A few bruises, nothing serious." "You should not have done that," he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only concern. "You could have been killed." "So could you," she pointed out. "They were going to hurt you because of me. I could not allow that." They stood there, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath, see the complex mix of emotions in his eyes: relief, fear, gratitude, and something else, something deeper that made her heart race. "Thara," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with his words. "What is it?" She asked softly. "I cannot ask you to stay," he said finally. "Marcus was right about one thing: this is not over. They will come back, and next time they might bring more men or involve the authorities. As long as you are here, you are in danger. You should leave, go somewhere safer." "And where would that be?" Thara asked. "I have nowhere else to go, nowhere I would rather be." "Thara, I am not leaving," she interrupted firmly. "Unless you want me to go, if you tell me to leave, I will. But if you are asking me to go for my own safety, then my answer is no. I have spent years running, always looking over my shoulder, never having a place to call home. I am tired of running, Alden. I want to stay, here with you." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Alden's hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. "Do you understand what you are saying?" he asked. "If you stay, people will talk. They will assume things about our relationship. They will make your life and mine very difficult." "Let them talk," Thara said. "I have faced worse than gossip. The question is, what do you want?" Alden looked at her for a long moment, and she could see the internal battle playing out behind his eyes. Then, slowly, he smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and transformed his whole face. "I want you to stay," he said quietly. "I have wanted that for weeks now, but I was afraid to admit it. Afraid it was inappropriate or foolish or doomed to failure. But seeing you fight today, seeing you willing to risk everything to protect me the way I tried to protect you, I realized that I am tired of being afraid. Life is too short and too precious to waste on fear." "Then I will stay," Thara said, and her own smile matched his. They stood there, smiling at each other like fools, until Cora pushed her massive head between them, demanding attention. They both laughed, the tension breaking, and made their way back into the barn. That night, for the first time, Thara accepted Alden's invitation to have dinner in the house. They sat at his kitchen table, eating stew and fresh bread, talking about everything and nothing. It felt domestic and comfortable, like something they had been doing for years rather than weeks. "I never thought I would feel this way about anyone again," Alden admitted as they cleaned up after the meal. "After Alina died, I thought that chapter of my life was closed. But you have reminded me that the heart is more resilient than I gave it credit for." "I never thought I would feel this way about anyone at all," Thara said. "Least of all a human. My clan taught me that humans were the enemy, that they could never be trusted. But you are kinder and more honorable than any orc I ever knew. You judge people by their actions, not their appearance. That is a rare gift." "It is simply how I choose to live," Alden said. "We all have that choice, though not everyone makes it." They were standing close together at the sink, washing and drying dishes. Alden reached for a plate at the same moment Thara did, and their hands touched. Neither pulled away. Instead, Thara turned her hand over, lacing her fingers with his. His hands were calloused and worn, marked by a lifetime of hard work, but his grip was warm and gentle. "Is this all right?" she asked quietly. "More than all right," Alden said, and lifted their joined hands to press a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was so tender, so unexpectedly romantic, that Thara felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever treated her with such gentleness. In orc culture, affection was shown through strength and loyalty, not soft touches and sweet words. This was entirely new and entirely wonderful. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened and solidified. They remained cautious, aware that the threat from Marcus and his followers had not dissipated. Alden taught Thara more about treating animals, sharing his decades of knowledge. She proved to be an excellent student, her natural intelligence and careful observation skills making her a quick learner. In turn, Thara taught Alden about orcish culture and traditions, dispelling many of the misconceptions he had held. She showed him the intricate leather work that orcs were known for, teaching him the patterns and techniques. She shared stories of her people's history, the great migrations and battles that had shaped their civilization. They were building something together, brick by brick, day by day, a partnership that went beyond romance or convenience. They were learning to see the world through each other's eyes, to challenge their own assumptions and prejudices. Cora's leg healed completely, leaving only the slightest limp that would disappear with time. The war beast had grown comfortable at the homestead, often sprawling in patches of sunlight like an oversized house cat. Alden's other animals, initially terrified of her, had gradually accepted her presence. It was not uncommon to see Cora lying peacefully in the pasture while Alden's old mare grazed nearby. Winter arrived early that year, bringing heavy snows that isolated the homestead. For weeks, they saw no one, and the isolation was strangely perfect. They spent long evenings by the fire, Thara curled against Alden's side, reading from his collection of books or simply talking. Sometimes they did not talk at all, content just to be together in the peaceful silence. It was during one of these quiet evenings that Alden first kissed her. They had been sitting on the sofa, Thara's head resting on his shoulder, when she turned to say something and found his face inches from hers. The kiss, when it came, was gentle and questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, she leaned in, her hand coming up to cup his weathered cheek. They took things slowly, aware that they were navigating uncharted territory. The physical differences between them, her greater strength, his more fragile human body, required care and communication. But what they lacked in experience with each other, They made up for impatience and genuine affection. One night, as they lay tangled together in Alden's bed, Thara traced the scars on his hands and arms, the marks of his profession. "Do you ever regret your choices?" she asked. "Helping me, defying your community, all of it." "Never," Alden said firmly. "Every choice I have made led me here to this moment. How could I regret that? We have made ourselves outcasts," Thara pointed out, "neither fully accepted by your people or mine." "Then we will make our own people," Alden said. "You, me, Cora, and whoever else is brave enough to choose compassion over hate. We will build something new here." It was an ambitious dream, perhaps even a foolish one. But lying there in the warmth and safety of Alden's arms, Thara found herself believing it might be possible. Spring came, bringing with it a thaw of both the snow and some of the local hostility. Word had spread about Thara's defeat of Marcus in single combat, and while many still viewed her with suspicion, there was a grudging respect. A few of the braver souls from nearby homesteads began coming to Alden for veterinary services again, though they made it clear they were there for his skill, not his company. Alden and Thara used these visits as opportunities to demonstrate that orcs were not the monsters people believed them to be. Thara helped with difficult cases, using her strength to restrain panicked animals or her steady hands for delicate work. She was unfailingly polite and professional, never giving anyone cause to complain. Slowly, incrementally, opinions began to shift. It helped that Thara saved a child's beloved dog when it was attacked by a wild animal, using her knowledge of healing herbs to treat the wounds until Alden could arrive. The child's parents, initially horrified to have an orc near their property, found themselves grudgingly grateful. It was not acceptance, not exactly, but it was a start. That summer, a delegation arrived at the homestead, 3 orc warriors, 2 male and 1 female, all heavily armed and looking intimidating. Thara recognized them immediately as members of her former clan. "We have been searching for you," the female warrior, whose name was Raksha, said without preamble. "The clan wishes you to return." "Why?" Thara asked, standing protectively in front of Alden. "Because you were right," Raksha said simply. "The old ways are failing us. Our raids bring short-term gains but long-term suffering. We are losing territory, losing warriors, losing our future. The elders who exiled you have been replaced. The new leadership wants to try a different path, and they remember that you always spoke of peace and cooperation. They want you to come back and help guide this transition." It was tempting. The validation she had craved for years, the acknowledgement that her ideas had merit, the chance to reunite with her people. But Thara found herself hesitating. "I have a life here now," she said slowly. "Responsibilities. Commitments." Raksha's gaze moved to Alden, assessing him. "The human, we heard rumors. Is it true you have bonded with him?" "Yes," Thara said, lifting her chin defiantly. "I love him." The 3 orcs exchanged glances. Finally, Raksha nodded. "Then bring him with you. If your clan is to change, we must start accepting that bonds can form across species lines. Let him be proof that coexistence is possible." Alden stepped forward. "I appreciate the offer, but I cannot simply abandon my homestead and my practice. I have responsibilities here as well." "We are not asking you to abandon anything permanently," Raksha clarified. "We ask only that you come for a time, to meet with our leaders, to share your knowledge and experience. Perhaps a few months. Then you can decide if you wish to remain or return here." Thara and Alden looked at each other, having a silent conversation. Finally, Alden nodded slightly. "We will consider your offer," Thara said. "Give us a few days to make arrangements and discuss what this would mean." The orc delegation agreed to return in 3 days for their answer. That night, Thara and Alden sat up late, talking through their options. The decision was complicated, fraught with potential risks and rewards. "I do not want to pressure you," Thara said. "If you say no, I will respect that. This is your home, your life." "It is our home now," Alden corrected. "And I will not lie, the thought of traveling to an orc settlement is terrifying. But it is also an incredible opportunity. How many humans have been invited to live among orcs in peace? If we can help facilitate understanding between our peoples, prevent even a fraction of the violence and suffering that has plagued the borderlands, is that not worth the risk?" "It could be dangerous," Thara warned. "Not all orcs will be happy about the changes. There will be resistance, possibly even violence." "There is danger here too," Alden pointed out. "Marcus and his ilk have not given up. They are just biding their time. At least with your clan we would have allies." They talked through scenarios and possibilities until the early hours of the morning. By the time they finally went to bed, they had reached a decision. When the orc delegation returned 3 days later, Thara gave them their answer. "We will come with you, but we have conditions. Alden's safety must be guaranteed. He will be treated as my bonded mate with all the respect and protection that entails, and we retain the right to leave if the situation becomes untenable. We are partners in this, not prisoners." Raksha bared her teeth in what was, for an orc, a smile. "Agreed. We leave tomorrow at dawn." The journey to the orc settlement took nearly 2 weeks, traveling through rugged terrain that tested both Alden's endurance and his courage. The orc warriors were initially skeptical of him, but his willingness to help with camp tasks and his obvious skill in treating injuries. One of the warriors had an old wound that was not healing properly, which Alden cleaned and dressed, gradually won their grudging respect. The settlement itself was larger than Alden had expected, a sprawling community built into the side of a mountain, with stone buildings and terraced gardens. Orcs of all ages moved through the streets, going about their daily business. Children played in the squares and merchants hawked their wares. It looked, Alden realized, remarkably like a human village. The architecture was different. The inhabitants were green-skinned with tusks, but the essential pattern of life was the same. People and orcs were people. He was more certain of that than ever, living, working, raising families, building futures. The meeting with the clan leadership was intimidating. 5 elders, all warriors who had earned their positions through strength and wisdom, sat in a great hall carved from the living rock. They regarded Alden with undisguised curiosity and suspicion. "So this is the human who has captured our Thara's heart," the eldest, a female named Gortha with silver streaking her hair, said. Her voice was gravelly but not unkind. "Tell me, Alden of the humans, why should we trust you?" Alden stood straight, meeting her gaze. "You should not trust me based on my words alone. Trust, whether between individuals or peoples, must be earned through consistent action over time. What I can tell you is this: I have spent my life trying to reduce suffering wherever I find it. I treated Thara and her war beast not because I expected reward or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. I am here because I believe that the cycle of violence between our peoples serves no one. If I can use my skills and knowledge to help build bridges, to heal old wounds both literal and figurative, then I will do so." The elders murmured among themselves. Finally, Gortha nodded. "Well spoken. You may stay for now. Thara will introduce you to our community and our ways. We will watch and judge your character by your deeds." Over the following weeks, Alden threw himself into learning and helping. He worked with the orc animal handlers, sharing his veterinary knowledge while learning about the unique creatures they bred and raised. He assisted the healers, discovering that orcish medicine relied heavily on herbal remedies and spiritual healing practices that complemented his own scientific understanding. Most importantly, he simply lived among the orcs, allowing them to see that humans were not so different from themselves. He played with orc children who were initially terrified of him but gradually warmed up. He shared meals with warriors who told stories of battles and adventures. He learned the orcish language, stumbling over the guttural sounds but persisting until he could make himself understood. Thara watched him navigate this strange new world with pride. He never condescended or tried to impose human ways on the orc community. Instead, he approached everything with genuine curiosity and respect, asking questions and listening to the answers. One evening, about 2 months into their stay, Thara and Alden stood on a terrace overlooking the settlement. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "You have exceeded every expectation," Thara said softly. "The elders are impressed. Gortha told me yesterday that you have done more to change orc perceptions of humans than decades of treaties and negotiations." "I am just being myself," Alden said with a shrug. "Though I admit, I have learned far more than I have taught. Your people have a rich culture, ancient wisdom. Humans could learn much from orcs if we set aside our prejudices." "It goes both ways," Thara said. "We orcs have been so focused on our warrior traditions that we have neglected other aspects of civilization. Your approach to animal care, your systematic methods of treatment, these things are revelations to our handlers. And your insistence on treating even the smallest creatures with dignity has sparked discussions about compassion that would have been unthinkable a few years ago." Alden took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "Do you regret leaving the homestead, giving up that quiet life for this complicated one?" "Never," Thara said firmly. "Though I do miss the peace sometimes, and I worry about what is happening back there." "Will Marcus and his followers destroy what we built?" "Garrett promised to watch over the place," Alden reminded her. "And we can always go back, rebuild if necessary. But right now, we are doing something important here. We are proving that cooperation is possible, that love can bridge any divide." As if to emphasize his point, several young orcs ran past, laughing and chasing each other. One of them, a girl named Kira who had attached herself to Alden with the devotion of a puppy, stopped and waved at them before running on. "She wants to be a healer," Thara said, smiling. "She told me yesterday that when she grows up, she wants to be just like Uncle Alden and help animals." "Uncle Alden," he repeated, chuckling. "I have been called many things in my life, but that is a new one. Does it bother you? On the contrary, I find it rather endearing. After Alina and I could not have children, I thought I had lost my chance to be any sort of parental figure. Having these young ones look up to me, it fills something I did not realize was empty." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. The future was uncertain, fraught with challenges and obstacles. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. The turning point in orc-human relations came unexpectedly, triggered by a crisis that required cooperation. A sickness swept through the settlement, affecting both orcs and their animals. Alden recognized it as a form of pneumonia, treatable if caught early but deadly if allowed to progress. He worked tirelessly alongside the orcish healers, combining their herbal knowledge with his understanding of disease transmission and treatment. Together, they saved dozens of lives. The collaborative effort demonstrated beyond any doubt that humans and orcs could work together effectively when they set aside their prejudices. Word spread beyond the settlement. Other orc clans sent delegations to learn about the successful treatment methods. Some of these delegations were skeptical about Alden's involvement, but the results spoke for themselves. Gradually, cautiously, doors began to open. Alden and Thara found themselves becoming ambassadors of a sort, traveling to different settlements, teaching, learning, building relationships. It was exhausting work, but deeply fulfilling. They could see, in small but significant ways, how attitudes were shifting. 6 months after arriving at the settlement, they received unexpected news. A messenger arrived from the human territories with a letter from Garrett. The local magistrate, impressed by reports of Alden's work, and aware that his harsh policies had only escalated tensions, was interested in opening official dialogue with the orc clans. He requested that Alden return to serve as a liaison, if he was willing. "This is what we have been working toward," Thara said as they discussed the letter. "Official recognition, formal cooperation, it is more than I dared hope for." "It is just a first step," Alden cautioned. "There will be setbacks, resistance from hardliners on both sides. But yes, it is progress." "What do you want to do?" Thara asked. Alden considered the question carefully. "I want to go back. I miss the homestead, the quiet rhythms of that life, but I do not want to lose what we have built here. Is there a way to maintain both?" They discussed the problem with the clan elders, who were supportive. They proposed a rotation system. Alden and Thara would spend several months at the homestead, serving human communities and hosting orcs who wished to learn about human culture. Then they would return to the settlement for several months, continuing their work there. It would be demanding, requiring constant travel and adaptation, but it would allow them to maintain connections in both worlds. The magistrate agreed to the arrangement, and so Alden and Thara began their new life as true bridges between cultures. They traveled back to the homestead, which Garrett had indeed maintained well in their absence. Word of their return spread quickly, and the reactions were mixed. Some humans welcomed them, curious about their experiences and eager to learn. Others remained hostile, viewing Alden as a traitor and Thara as an ongoing threat, but there were enough of the former to make a difference. Farmers who had animals that needed treatment began to overcome their prejudices when faced with a sick cow or a lame horse. Seeing Alden and Thara work together, witnessing the obvious skill and care that Thara brought to her work, slowly eroded old stereotypes. One particularly memorable case involved a difficult birth with a prized mare belonging to one of the wealthier landowners in the region, a man named Thomas, who had been vocally opposed to orc presence in human territories. The mare was in distress, the foal breached, and no amount of human effort could resolve the situation. Alden arrived with Thara, and Thomas initially refused to let her near his animal. "I will not have an orc touching my horse," he said flatly. "Then your horse and her foal will likely die," Alden said bluntly. "The foal is positioned wrong, and I do not have the strength to reposition it alone. Thara has the strength and the skill. She has successfully delivered dozens of difficult births. Your pride is going to cost you a valuable animal and her offspring." Thomas wavered, looking at his mare, who was clearly suffering. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Fine. But if anything goes wrong, it will be because we started too late," Alden interrupted. "Now, please step back and let us work." Thara approached the mare carefully, speaking softly in Orcish. The horse, who should have been panicked by the presence of an orc, seemed to calm at the sound of her voice. Thara's hands, so much stronger than Alden's, were also incredibly gentle as she reached in to reposition the foal. It was delicate, dangerous work, and Alden held his breath as he watched her maneuver. Finally, with one smooth motion, Thara guided the foal into the correct position. The mare, given new strength by hope, pushed, and moments later a wet, gangly foal slipped into the world. Thara caught it carefully, clearing its airways and rubbing it vigorously with straw to stimulate breathing. The foal gasped, then let out a wavering whinny. Its mother nickered in response, already turning to nuzzle her baby. It was a perfect birth, the kind that reminded Alden why he had chosen this profession. Thomas stared at Thara with an expression of stunned disbelief. "You saved them," he said, as though he could not quite believe it. "I did my job," Thara said simply, same as Alden would have done if he had the physical strength required. "I was wrong about you," Thomas said slowly. "About orcs in general, maybe. If you can care for animals with that much skill and compassion, then perhaps orcs are not so different from us after all." It was a small moment, one interaction among hundreds, but it represented something crucial. Hearts and minds were changing, one person at a time. As the seasons cycled and years passed, Alden and Thara built a life that was rich and full, though not always easy. They faced opposition, dealt with violence from extremists on both sides, and weathered crises that tested their bond. But they persevered, supported by a growing network of allies, humans and orcs who believed in their vision of peaceful coexistence. Alden's homestead became a gathering place, a neutral ground where members of both species could meet and learn about each other. Thara established a training program for young orcs interested in animal care, creating a new generation of healers who understood both orcish and human methods. Alden wrote extensively about his experiences, and his writings circulated among both human and orc communities, challenging assumptions and inspiring hope. On a crisp autumn morning, 5 years after they had first met, Alden and Thara stood on their porch, watching Cora play with a litter of her puppies in the yard. The war beast had mated with one of Alden's large hunting dogs, producing a new hybrid breed that combined the intelligence and loyalty of both species. The pups were already in high demand, with both human and orc families requesting them. Who would have thought, Alden mused, that a broken leg would lead to all this? Thara leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. The gods work in mysterious ways, or perhaps it was simply fate, two souls destined to find each other regardless of the obstacles. "Do you ever miss your warrior life?" Alden asked. "The freedom of the road, the excitement of battle?" "Sometimes," Thara admitted. "But what we have built here is its own kind of battle, its own adventure. We are fighting prejudice and hate with compassion and understanding. That is a war worth waging." Alden smiled and turned to kiss her forehead. "You know, I never thought I would find love again after Alina. I certainly never imagined it would be with an orc warrior who barged into my life with an injured war beast and an attitude." Thara laughed, the sound rich and full. "And I never imagined I would fall in love with a stubborn old human veterinarian who saw me as a person instead of a monster. Life is full of surprises." "The best kind," Alden agreed. That evening they hosted a dinner at the homestead, a monthly tradition they had established. Around their table sat humans and orcs, breaking bread together, sharing stories and laughter. There was Garrett and his wife, Thomas the horse breeder, Raksha and 2 other orc warriors, several young healers from both species, and little Kira, now a promising apprentice veterinarian. The conversation flowed freely, touching on everything from the latest breeding techniques to philosophical discussions about the nature of civilization. There were moments of tension when old prejudices surfaced, but they were handled with patience and understanding. This was what progress looked like, not perfect harmony, but the willingness to keep trying, to keep listening, to keep building bridges. After dinner, as the guests mingled and talked, Alden found himself standing alone on the porch for a moment, looking out at the land he loved. He felt Thara's presence before she spoke, that deep connection they had developed over years of partnership. "You look thoughtful," she observed, slipping her hand into his. "Just reflecting on how much has changed," Alden said. "5 years ago, I was a lonely old man going through the motions of living. Now I have a purpose again, a partner who challenges and inspires me, and a chance to make a real difference in the world." "We are making a difference," Thara said firmly. "Slowly, yes, but undeniably. The next generation will grow up in a world where human-orc cooperation is normal, not revolutionary." "I hope you are right," Alden said, "though I suspect we will not live to see the full fruits of our labor. This is work that will take generations." "Then we will train those who come after us to continue it," Thara said. "Our students, our allies, those pups playing in the yard, they are our legacy." Alden nodded, feeling the truth of her words. They had started something larger than themselves, a movement toward understanding and peace that would outlive them both. As the evening deepened and stars appeared in the clear sky, their guests began to depart, offering thanks and warm farewells. When the last one had gone, Alden and Thara sat together on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket against the cooling air. "I have been thinking," Thara said quietly, "about making things official." "Official how?" Alden asked, though his heart had already begun to beat faster. "Marriage," Thara said. "I know it is complicated, that there are no legal frameworks for human-orc unions, but I want to make a formal commitment. I want everyone to know that we are bonded, that we choose each other for life." Alden felt warmth spreading through his chest. "You want to marry me?" "If you will have me," Thara said, turning to meet his eyes. "I know I am not easy, that my presence complicates your life," but he silenced her with a kiss, deep and full of promise. When he pulled back, he was grinning. "I would be honored to marry you, Thara. You are the best thing that has happened to me in a decade, and I want to spend whatever years I have left building this life with you. Even though I will likely outlive you by decades?" Thara asked, voicing the concern they had both carefully avoided. Orcs lived longer than humans, and she was so much younger. The day would come when she would have to face his death. "Even then," Alden said firmly, "whatever time we have, we will make it count, and when I am gone, you will carry on this work, this dream we share. That is its own kind of immortality." Thara rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat in peaceful silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. They were building something that would last long after they were both dust, a foundation for a better world, one where love could transcend species, where compassion mattered more than prejudice, where an old veterinarian and an orc warrior could find happiness together despite all the forces arrayed against them. They held their wedding ceremony at the homestead on a beautiful spring day, combining human and orcish traditions in a way that felt uniquely theirs. Garrett served as Alden's best man, while Raksha stood with Thara. The guest list included humans and orcs in equal measure, a powerful statement of unity. The ceremony itself was simple but profound. They exchanged vows under an arch woven with flowers from both human and orcish lands. Alden promised to honor and cherish Thara for all his days, to stand beside her in her battles and celebrate her victories. Thara vowed to protect and support Alden, to share his burdens and his joys, to build a future together one day at a time. When the officiant, a human priest who had overcome his own prejudices to perform the ceremony, pronounced them married, the cheer that went up from the assembled guests was genuine and joyful. It felt, in that moment, like anything was possible. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and feasting. Alden, who had not danced in years, found himself swept into the festivities, laughing as Thara spun him around with her greater strength. They were surrounded by friends, by people who believed in their vision, and the air was full of hope. As the years continued to pass, that hope proved warranted. The work that Alden and Thara had started spread, inspiring others to question old hatreds and build new connections. Trade agreements were established between human and orc communities. Mixed settlements began to form in border regions. Young people from both species sought out Alden and Thara's homestead, eager to learn and contribute to the cause of peace. Alden aged, as humans do. His hair turned completely silver, his movements slower, his hands less steady. But his mind remained sharp, and his commitment to the work never wavered. Thara was always at his side, her strength compensating for his increasing frailty, her love sustaining him through the aches and pains of advancing years. On his 70th birthday, surrounded by friends and students, Alden reflected on the improbable journey his life had taken. From a lonely veterinarian set in his ways to a pioneer of interspecies cooperation, from grief-stricken widower to a man blessed with a second great love, it had been a remarkable transformation. "I could not have done any of this without you," he told Thara that night as they lay in bed. "You gave me purpose again, a reason to wake up each morning excited about what the day might bring." "We did it together," Thara corrected gently. "You had the courage to see past my green skin and tusks to the person beneath. You risked everything to help a stranger." "I simply gave you the opportunity to be the man you always were." "Still," Alden persisted, "I am grateful for every day, every moment, even the difficult ones." "As am I," Thara said, holding him close. "As am I." Alden's final years were spent in peace, tending to his animals, teaching his students, and sitting on the porch with Thara, watching the world they had helped create flourish. He passed away quietly in his sleep at the age of 74, Thara beside him, holding his hand. His death was mourned by both humans and orcs, a testament to the bridges he had built. The funeral service was attended by hundreds, and the stories shared painted a picture of a man who had chosen compassion over convenience, understanding over prejudice, love over fear. Thara grieved deeply, as expected, but she also found solace in continuing their shared work. She ran the homestead and the training programs, wrote about their experiences, and served as a living bridge between the two species. She wore her wedding band always, a reminder of the love they had shared and the promise she had made to carry on their vision. Decades after Alden's death, when Thara herself was an elder respected by both humans and orcs, she would often sit on that same porch and tell stories to the youngsters who gathered to hear them. Stories about an old veterinarian who had looked at an injured orc war beast and seen only a creature in need, who had rolled up his sleeves and said, "Hold her," beginning a chain of events that would change two worlds. The homestead became a school, then a symbol, then a living monument to the power of compassion. Human and orc children learned side by side, growing up in a world where cooperation was normal, where differences were celebrated rather than feared. The changes that Alden and Thara had started continued to ripple outward, touching generation after generation. And though the old veterinarian was gone, his legacy lived on in the healed animals, the trained healers, the peaceful settlements, and most of all, in the love story that had transcended every boundary. A love that proved what Alden had always believed, that kindness matters, that understanding is possible, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply seeing another being's pain and choosing to help. Thara lived to a great old age, finally passing peacefully surrounded by students and friends, both human and orc. She was buried beside Alden on the homestead they had shared, and their graves became a place of pilgrimage for those who believed in the dream of peaceful coexistence. The world they left behind was not perfect. Prejudice and conflict still existed. Problems still needed solving. But it was undeniably better than the one they had been born into, transformed by two individuals who had dared to love across boundaries and work tirelessly to build something new. And in the barn that Alden had first walked into all those years ago, descendants of Thara still lived and worked, bonded with riders of both species, carrying on the tradition of partnership and trust. The hybrid breed that Thara had started flourished, a living symbol of what was possible when different beings came together in cooperation rather than conflict. On quiet evenings when the wind blew through the valley, some swore they could hear echoes of laughter from the porch of the old homestead, the sound of an elderly veterinarian and his orc wife, still together in spirit, still watching over the world they had helped heal, one broken bone and one opened heart at a time. Their story became legend, passed down through generations, inspiring countless others to choose compassion, to question their prejudices, to believe that love could indeed conquer hate. And it all began with a simple choice: to see past fear and division, to roll up one's sleeves and say, "I will help." That was the true legacy of Alden and Thara, not the specific things they accomplished, impressive as those were, but the principle they embodied. That every individual has the power to make a difference, that small acts of kindness can have profound ripples, that the most important battles are often fought not with swords but with open hearts and helping hands. Years turned to decades, decades to centuries, and still their story endured. New challenges arose, old tensions sometimes flared, but the foundation they had laid held strong. The world continued to grow and change, but at its heart was the lesson they had taught. That understanding begins with a willingness to listen, that peace requires courage, and that love, real, deep, transformative love, knows no boundaries of species, culture, or creed. And somewhere, in the eternal beyond where spirits rest, an old veterinarian and his orc warrior wife walked together through fields of endless summer, Thara bounding at their side, finally at peace, finally home, their work complete and their love eternal.